So, what is Afrofuturism? It's a lot of things, but most importantly, it's a cultural aesthetic. It's a cross-section between science fiction and the African diaspora. Afrofuturism is such a overarching concept that a lot of things that even aren't Afrofuturist in label, you could probably put it under Afrofuturism if you look hard enough. Coined by Mark Dery in 1993 in his work Black to the Future, Afrofuturism is exactly that. Black people in science fiction. It's the cross. It's the intersection. It is I don't want to say hybridization, but it's the representation of Black people in science fiction. And as a young Black man, there's something dope about that. For me, I like to think that the old stupid stereotype where Black people allegedly can't swim, I like to think Afrofuturism takes a creative and innovative people. It takes that stereotype and says, you know what? You think we can't swim? We'll go to the stars. So the thing about Mark Dery's work, Black to the Future, he has an intimate discussion with 3 science fiction writers, Samuel Delany, Greg Tate, and Tricia Rose. He talks about how do they feel about Black people in science fiction at the time. Mind you, it's 1993, so everything I described previously hasn't exactly happened yet. Or has it? But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So when discussing things with Samuel Delany, he comes up first in the interviews. Delany makes the point between Black writers and white writers. There's a stark difference for how Black people are portrayed. Of course, there are characters who are supposed to be Black people, or that's the subtext you're supposed to gather from it. But Delany also goes as far as to go, well, why should I as a Black man accept the misrepresentation or the not quite on the nose characterization of your characters as Black people in science fiction? Why should I? That's because what we had at the time? Nah, I disagree with that. And I applaud Delany so much for that. The thing about Delany is he wasn't scared to voice that I love what you're trying to do with the concept, but I don't entirely agree with accepting those things from the pre-existing system. Greg Tate further builds upon that idea. Greg Tate goes, well, science fiction at the time doesn't just have to be about the othering of Black people. That shouldn't be the framework of this new concept. The othering and the oppression of Black people shouldn't be their only character traits. Stuff like hip-hop, Greg Tate goes as far as to mention, is it's supposed to look forward while simultaneously looking back. The thing about Greg Tate, he was expounding upon Delany's ideas and saying, hey, look, you do anything you want. When you're writing how you write and you have these ideas, why not? Let's do it. Tricia Rose's, her conversation and kind of laying the framework for this, I just want to prove that when reading Tricia Rose's part, she kind of discusses how Afrofuturism, the concepts at the time and a lot of the visualization of it, the kind of funky, like cybernetic, out of this world imagery, it can limit crossover into other genres. However, some of the themes that come with Afrofuturism is just limitless. For example, in some of her works and some of her contemporaries' works, she talked about how dystopian characters, dystopian women, had the choice between pregnancy in a patriarchal system or having to pick up a gun because that's how they defended themselves. Now that we've got the foundation out the way, let's talk about some people who embody the spirit of the movement. Hold on, baby. Let me pump my brakes for a second. Before we keep going forward, let's take it a little further than 93. You see, before Mark Dery coined the term Afrofuturism, a lot of people would argue artists like Jimi Hendrix and George Clinton embodied the movement. And no one embodied the movement more than Sun Ra. Sun Ra was a jazz artist and he was many things, a genius to some and eccentric to others. Meanwhile, I'm of the opinion he was both. Born Herman Poole Blunt on May 22nd, 1914, and Mr. Sun Ra, although he's long since left this earth, he has left a lasting impact on the movement. A lot of people know that name because they've seen the movies he's composed. They've heard some of his best work. They've heard his interviews in which he describes these larger-than-life ideas about spirituality and Black people, although later in his life he would come to shun the idea of race as a concept. He would often transcend his, how can I say this? Human limits, as he may have put it, and choose to believe that when asked where he was from, he would tell you oftentimes in the later parts of his life, to the left of Saturn. But for me, seeing that creativity, seeing that outlet, seeing one man being so eccentric, and especially with his music and his movies, it shows a multifacetedness with Afrofuturism that I've been admiring this whole time. How deep does the philosophy of the movement go? You know, it's got its roots in a lot of things, but we can talk primarily about three concepts: essentialism, anti-essentialism, and my favorite one, anti-essentialism. With anti-essentialism and essentialism and anti-essentialism, what are they? Well, the thing about essentialism is it's a theory that's saying that all things have an inherent value and defining characteristic. Anti-essentialism is saying, well, no, some of these things are a bit fluid, and it rejects the idea of essentialism. What Afrofuturism taps into is anti-essentialism. It firmly rejects the rigidity of one or the other. It embraces the idea that social, cultural, political things are dynamic and they constantly change, and you can redefine them however you would like. And in this redefinition, Sun Ra and his contemporaries took joy in that. When researching this episode, I likened it to thinking about the double consciousness that Du Bois put forth in Souls of Black Folk. It's trying to escape the idea of just one or the other, being black within a white space, and having to put on this other character for white America. So with these concepts in mind, how can we look forward, and where does that leave us in the modern day? It leaves us all over the place in the best of ways, baby. You know, in the video where we've talked about Afrofuturism, creating anything you want to be, and a man who believed he came from Saturn, are we finna pretend that me changing an outfit and getting a haircut over the course of 3 days is that much of a discrepancy? No? Okay then. To be black and a nerd is a wonderful thing, man. When I was coming up and when I was a kid, there was this thing of, you know, kids like to make fun of the nerds. And even now, a lot of people like to tell you, hey, being a nerd wasn't cool, da 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 da. And I just gotta tell you, from one adult to another, some of us were just weird kids, man. I mean, I admit that I ain't got no shame in that. But as I've gotten older and gotten into my swag, I realized, well, that was kind of probably the problem, because no one's complaining about me liking nerd stuff now. Heck, a lot of people I know now are really into comics and really into movies and film and media. Some people have those niches that you get into talking to them, that's their thing, and there are spaces for that. And it got me wondering, when I did the research for it, where does that really come from? How does that fit into this whole thing? This whole narrative of be someone who is so proud of these nerdy, creative ideas. You can exist within them. I read this article. It's called I Am What I Be. And within it, it discusses music and recording technology. And although it's a little dense and I definitely skimmed it, I synthesized a heavy bit of information from it. And it goes something like, as the standards for music creativity and album composition and the standards of the industry started developing in the 1900s, it was almost Eurocentric in its ideals. The white gaze was putting pressure on black creatives to, fit into the mold. That sort of double consciousness that we talked about earlier in the video, the ideas present in Afrofuturism to reject the rigidity of those standards become ever present as people start doing their own thing. That's where you get your Sun Ra's and your Jimi Hendrixes, and in the modern era, your Janelle Monáe's. They all begin to exhibit this freedom, this limitless creativity. And even outside of music, when you talk about books, when you talk about film, when you talk about literature, it just, all these things lend itself to, hey, we're going to do what we want, and we're going to be loud about it. We're going to be as creative as we want about it. And I admire that. 2016 Vice article, filmmaker M. Ashley Dukan talked about a documentary she was creating, and when she was trying to explore where these black spaces could be found within science fiction. And although I'm not sure if the film ever came to pass, I couldn't find it personally. It warmed my heart to know that there were other people who had these same questions as me. Where are these black spaces? And as I've gotten older and I've explored different genres and things, I'm grateful to my friends who introduced me to Warhammer 40,000 and Dungeons and Dragons and Dune, and we've spilled over into various forms of anime and fantasy. Because Afrofuturism isn't just the science part. It's a culmination of spirituality and different types of theories. There was a video in which Natasha Womack was discussing with a class of children how Afrofuturism isn't just these grand, elaborate ideas. It can be about the simple joys in life. It can be about walking home from school, on your way to work, having a great day, have a beautiful day. It isn't just about the framework of oppression and survival and resistance. It can be a work of celebration. I would be remiss if I didn't extend that same gratitude and that same celebration not only to our forebears and our ancestors, but to everyone I've ever been in a group chat with that's shared an anime, a comic book, a video game. To me, that is the layman working in forms of Afrofuturism. This one's for y'all. My name is Virginia J, and this has been the Parlay Bull Podcast. Peace.